who's focuses on helping needy families in our Redwood City area. And he's also on the board of directors for the San Mateo County College District Housing Corporation, and they have been responsible for putting housing on college in San Mateo and Granada, and I think they've already started construction in Thailand. So it's pretty exciting to have affordable housing on campus for professors and their staff. So I will turn it over to Michael, and we will hear from him. Thank you.
Grace, thank you so much. I'm a bit of a pacer, so I'm going to stand up. I don't like to sit when I give a presentation. I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to be here tonight and speak. A little bit of background further on what I do and who I am. I am a housing wonk. I've been in the housing business pretty much my entire adult life. After a brief detour and stint at the Air Force Academy, I realized I could not be an Air Force officer, and went to school in California, UC Santa Barbara. I worked my way through college. I started as a gardener and a maintenance man, and I was an RA, dorm manager. I ran some graduate student housing my final year in college. During the summers, I worked in construction to help raise money for tuition, and then worked in CETA programs for underprivileged youth. Got out of school, went right into housing, and I started out in subsidized housing. I was involved in managing a portfolio of Farmers Home 515 projects in Southern California, the high desert communities of Adelanto, Beaumont, Lake Elsinore, etc. And the Farmers Home 515 project is like the rural equivalent of Section 8 project-based housing. After doing that, I went to work for Gulch & Kest in Culver City. They're the largest Section 8 project developer in the state. They had a massive portfolio. They shipped me north. I ran a portfolio here in Northern California. And then I got involved after that. I shifted to the for-profit side of housing and worked for the TAN Group in Palo Alto, which built quite a portfolio in the local area. Then I went to Essex, which was a subsidiary at that time of Marcus and Millichap. It has since spun out right after I left them as a publicly traded REIT, one of the largest housing providers here in the state. And I left them to found a company with my partner, my wife, and we've been building Prodessa property here for the last 25 years. We currently manage about 2,600 units of residential housing, 250,000 plus square feet of commercial real estate. We have a company that does investments as well. And then we got involved with the St. Francis Center in Redwood City about 15 plus years ago when another nun we were helping in East Palo Alto, Sister Trinitas, introduced us to Sister Christina and asked us if we could help her out. So we got involved helping manage their 24-unit building that they had in Redwood City in the North Fair neighborhood. And once you meet Sister Christina, you realize saying no is pretty much impossible. She is just an embodiment of grace. You meet her and you hear what she's doing, you see what she's doing, and the next question is, what can I do to help? So I got involved, my wife got involved. I'm now the chairman of the board of the St. Francis Center. My wife is the treasurer, she's a CPA, and my business partner. And it's been a joyous ride helping them work together to build a housing and provide services for families in North Fair Oaks. With our acquisition of 180 Buckingham, which is renamed the Costa de Sobrava, we acquired that back in September. The St. Francis Center now owns and runs 135 units of low-income housing to help the community in North Fair Oaks. So that's been a passion of ours to do that, and we're going to continue working to try to expand that portfolio of housing. So just to get a quick sense of who's in the room, how many people in the room own a single-family home? Raise your hands. Okay, and unoccupied. How many people rent? Okay, so a couple of renters. How many people own rental property? Okay. A couple of rental property. All right. And how many people are empty nesters? I'm one of those. My kids are gone. Well, that helps me frame kind of who we're talking to. So the topic today is the housing crisis deconstructed. So I wanted to kind of walk us through kind of where we are, where we came from, how we got here, where we're at today, and kind of what's a potential path forward. Where can we go? What can we do? And I've been in the front row of this debacle that we face today through all this 37 plus years that I've been involved in housing. So how do we get here? Underbuilt. I mean, flat and simple. We have not built enough housing to keep pace with job growth and population growth. we have a massive deficit. If you look at some of the data that's been tossed about up at the state level, as of today, if you look at the preamble to Scott Wiener's bill, SB 50, which is on the floor being looked at this year in the current session, we have a 2 million unit deficit in housing currently in the state. And we're going to have 180,000 per year deficit going forward. So just to keep pace, to hold ground with the 2 million deficit, we have to construct 180,000 units per year through 2025 with the current projections and population growth in the state. That's a crisis. So how did that happen? What are the contributing factors? Zoning and planning. I had a little thing, when Joyce interviewed me to talk about this, I did a little simple graphical representation of the problem we face. Look at my phone case, and let's assume this case is San Mateo County, okay? This part right here, that circles where my camera is, that's where you can build housing in the county. See that little dot where the light blasts out? That's where you can build multifamily housing in the county. It's a pretty accurate representation of where we can actually build housing that can house people in this county. There's our crisis. We've had a robust failure at the planning level to make land available to build the housing that we need. We simply do not entitle enough land for housing. We've done a great job of protecting green space. We've got watershed, we've got green space everywhere. We've done a great job with it. I mean, look at these beautiful hillsides, look at the coast. The bulk of our land is agricultural land and preserved land for watershed and parks. Look at what we've got. So we've restricted ourselves down to a tiny little slice, and the bulk, if you look at this, the bulk of what we have for residential housing, all this area other than my little dot in here, is what? It's R1, single family homes. We're stuck, in my mind, we're stuck in this 1950s notion of leave it to beaver. Everybody needs their quarter acre and their nice little house. Well, in today's world, if we've decided we're not going to build in the hills, we're not going to fill in the bay, where are we going to build? Where are we going to build?
Sure. What about the backyards?
Backyards, right. I'll get to that. So, look at the time to construct. Another crisis we've got is, if you look back in the 50s and the 60s and 70s, when we built a lot of housing in Silicon Valley and the peninsula, it was 1 to 2 years construction cycle. From when you decided to build to when you got the project done. Today, if you're lucky, it's 5, most likely it's 7 or more. So think about that. Your typical economic cycle is 7 to 10 years. So the other problem we've created is we've made it so difficult to build with CEQA challenges, neighborhood group challenges, you name it. You try to build a project today and you're the enemy. You are the enemy. So that timeline is stretched out. It takes a lot of time. What does that timeline mean? Risk, cost. If I want to build a project, I've got to acquire the land, I have to plan to hold it for 5 to 7, maybe 10 years to get it built. What happens if I come out of the ground 2, 3, 4 years into an economic cycle? Then I open my doors into a down cycle, and you're in trouble, and now you're scrambling. So to accommodate for that risk, what do developers have to do? They have to build in a lot of fees. They have to build in a lot more cost in order to make the project make sense. The other is in our zeal to make housing built where we want, we've also tacked on a ton of fees. The average cost today to a developer to build a project, the fee side is $100,000 to $200,000 per unit in most jurisdictions. That's your park fee, your city fee, your neighborhood fee, your library fee. I mean, fee. Tacked on. What happens to that fee? Added to the price. I was at a conference just earlier this year. The current price to build a new apartment complex today on the peninsula, $600,000 to $750,000 per unit. You go up to San Francisco, it's somewhere between $750,000 and $1 million per unit to build an apartment complex. If you look at development today, you can only build 2 types of housing. Over here, market rate housing. Over here, tax credit subsidized housing. You cannot build to the middle today. The numbers don't work. It's too expensive. So the only middle income housing you got is building a lot of market rate housing and building a lot of tax credit housing so the older buildings can fill the middle. You cannot make the numbers work. It just doesn't happen anymore today. It cannot be developed. And it's because of all these factors. So, what do? We've had some progress. If you think at the state level, we had some progress made. Laws were passed that required every single city to have an ADU ordinance. What does ADU mean?
Accessory
dwelling unit. The backyards, as this gentleman was pointing out, right? I'm going to give a shout out to Pat Brown and the group from Home for All. I was a part of their task force, the Jobs Housing Task Force, which the outgrowth of which was the Home for All program. And what that program is talking about, one of their key issues is ADUs. If you look at the data, and Pat, I may misquote this because it's from memory, but there are 3.5, I think, give or take, million single-family homes in the greater Bay Area. If we just put ADUs on 5% of those houses, we would solve our housing problem in the Bay Area. 5%. That's all it takes. But if you start deconstructing all the ADU ordinances, a lot of cities, the state said you have to have them, but the devil's in the details. Okay? You start digging into the ordinances, and there's a little bit of pushback. You have to occupy either the primary residence or the ADU that you add, which makes sense at the initial outset, but what if maybe you decide to move and someone else wants to buy it? That goes with the land. That's required. So that makes the constriction on selling it, making it easier for you to exit that house. Also, a lot of these ordinances have pretty onerous setback requirements and other hoops you've got to jump through, which makes it more complicated and more difficult to build. But that is a key area that we can begin to make progress happen. There have been a number of bills happening at the state level. Senator Wiener's been a great champion of housing. He pushed through SB 35 to try to streamline a lot of the processes to get housing built. It's made transit-oriented developments easier to develop, which is something we need to do. We need housing close to transit. His new SB 50 kind of pushes a lot of that further. How many of you have heard of RENA? RENA numbers. So RENA are the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. So, and I don't know the frequency, but periodically, we get together, we come up with our number is that we need for each city. Up until now, it's just been a number. There's been no teeth. Okay? Right now, the legislature is working on legislation that will put teeth in that. We've heard Governor Newsom talk about that in his State of the State address. He wants to tie funding, some of the funding mechanisms, specifically transit dollars, to whether you meet those RENA allocations or not. Because right now it's been a loose mandate with no enforcement. Just, hey, you ought to be building this, but no hand slap, nothing happens. We need that to happen. There are a slew of housing bills out there. Now, what are the other solutions? One of the solutions that's being tossed around a lot right now is expanding rent control. Okay? So we see ballot measure happen about 2 years ago now in Mountain View, put rent control on the charter, because it was a charter amendment in Mountain View, so we added rent control to Mountain View. San Jose has had rent control for a long time. It got ratcheted down further. On the peninsula, we had at the same time the Mountain View proposal was being voted on, we had a ballot measure for rent control in Burlingame and Mountain View. Those were both defeated. There's been talk in Redwood City about rent control. There's been talk in Menlo Park about rent control. There's talk about rent control right now down in Santa Cruz nearby. There's a plethora of conversations going on about rent control. I'll stand up in front of you right now, whether you disagree with me or not, and I'll tell you rent control is not the answer. It's not going to solve the problem. It's like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. The boat's going down. No matter where you put the chairs and what you do, the boat's going to sink. I'll tell you why. If we had 100 people in a room and we had 50 bottles of water, and we decided we had a shortage of water, and the bottles were selling for $1 a piece, and we just said, hey, I can sell this, I'll reduce the price of the water to 50 cents a bottle. Is that going to make any more water happen? That's what rent control does. It doesn't create another unit of housing. Not one. In fact, it creates a bunch of disincentives for developers to build housing. At the state level, we all remember Prop 10, it was just on the ballot, got defeated. The industry pushed $80 million into the campaign to defeat that. That money could have been spent on building more units, rehabbing older housing, and the legislature is already talking about instituting statewide rent control. Oregon just passed it, statewide. They're talking about it now in Sacramento. There's a bill called the Costa-Hawkins Act, which was passed, I don't even remember, 30 years ago, 20? Yeah, quite a lot, right? It has 3 tenets. It says, you cannot have rent control on single-family homes and map condominiums. You cannot have rent control on anything built after 1995, and you have to allow for what's called vacancy decontrol, which means when a unit becomes vacant, the rent can go to market. I was one of those people who was operating housing before Costa-Hawkins, and I ran housing in East Palo Alto at that time, where we had strict rent control. So literally, let's say somebody was living in that unit and lived there for 20 years, and the owner had been really nice and left the rent really low. That person moved out, the next tenant got that rent. And you were allowed a small increase each year, whatever the ordinance allowed. And so you might have one tenant paying $200 a month, another tenant paying $300 a month for the same studio, one paying $400, one paying $150, and they move out, and the market rent could never move up to market. So what does that do to somebody who owns the building? Do they have money coming in to fix the roof, paint the walls? No. So I could go on all day about why rent control is a failed policy. It's not going to solve our problem. In fact, if we lose vacancy decontrol, if the legislature in its infinite wisdom decides to completely repeal Costa-Hawkins, I'll tell you one thing that will happen. You won't see much more housing built in this state. Not multifamily housing. Because capital is mobile. Buildings aren't, but capital is. So investors will say, if I build a new building and my rents are capped the day I open the doors, is that a good investment? Here's another way to look at it. We talk about minimum wage laws. Have we ever passed a maximum wage law? Who's going to stand up and say we should vote for a maximum wage law?
Might not be a bad idea. $45 million parachutes.
But for the average worker, no, right? Well, that's what we've done with rent control. We've capped what people can earn on their investments. We've said you can't. We haven't done it for single-family homes. Part of the racing cost of housing is houses are so expensive. Nobody's standing up to vote for capping single-family home prices either. So we have to think about this. So what's working? ADUs are working a little bit. We got to prime that pump. We got to get more of that going. I think we have to blow through some of the barriers in the cities that have made their blocks a little too small, a little too tight. We've got to fix the planning approval process. I mean, think about, I'll tell you a story. I live in Foster City, the little community by the bay, next to San Mateo. And there's a shopping center near my house. It's got a Lucky supermarket in it. It's got your couple of different dry cleaners and restaurants and little stuff. So somebody owns the center. The center's been around a long time, and it could use an update. So the developer, the owner, he hired architects, he made a big plan, he came in, he pitched it to the city planning department, and they, of course, typically in today's world, if you want to build a major project, you've got to go out on kind of a roadshow, you got to go have community meetings, you talk to neighbors, you bring groups in. So I love this stuff, so I go to one of these meetings, right? And I'm in a room, and there's about 10 times as many people as are here right now. And the architect's up front, and the owner's there, and they give their whole pitch, and it starts getting kind of nasty. And the people in the room are, why are you doing this? The traffic's going to be horrible. Our schools are going to be too crowded. On and on and on and on. And it's just negative, negative, negative. And what he wanted to do with the center was he wanted to, what's called right-size the center. make it 2 stories. It's an older 1-story center. Real estate's valuable. Let's make it 2 stories. He wanted to put 235 units of housing. The center sits on water in Foster City. And it's the back of the center, so you're not even utilizing this great resource of a water view. All the shops are oriented with their windows looking into the parking lot. Nothing orients to the water. So let's put housing on the water. Let people enjoy it, right? No. I, the crazy person that I am, stand up and raise my hand to speak. And I go, where are our children going to live? A lady about 3 rows back stands up and yells at me, they can move to Palo Alto! Jeez. I had to stifle insane laughter. If you think Foster City's expensive, try moving to Palo Alto, right? Where are our children going to live? Where are our grandchildren going to live? I, for one, I have 2 children. One of them does not live in the state anymore. She's living out in Denver, in Colorado. And I'm telling her, don't come back. Not because I don't want to be near her, not because my wife and I don't want to see our daughter. We don't want her to face the insanity that's housing in this state right now. My other daughter lives in San Francisco, has a great job, and lives like a college student, sharing rooms with other young 20, almost 30-somethings, bunked up like college kids. That's what a lot of our young people are doing today. If they don't have one of those crazy, insane, high-paying jobs at Google or Facebook, what are they relegated to? Bunking up together. So, how can we shape a better future? What's the answer? I'll tell you, it's build, 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 build. It's density. It's height. If I got to be benevolent dictator, I would have the peninsula look like Manhattan, which many people would not like. But if we want to have green hills, and we want to protect the bay, what's our choice? Now, my challenge to all of you, and to everyone whenever I talk to people, is show up at city council meetings. Not to speak against something, to speak for something. I have yet to see en masse a group of people show up when a housing project was on the docket of the city council meeting, people showing up with signs to protest to build the project. Doesn't happen. Because in the abstract, everybody's for housing. Everybody seems to be for housing in the abstract, but the minute it's going to be built within eyeshot or earshot of wherever I live, suddenly I move to this other camp, the no camp, and I figure out there's a frog that used to live there, or a butterfly, or something that has to be protected so that it doesn't get built. I'll give another little story. We have a client that we work with, they're developers. They live in Santa Cruz. They've developed single-family home tracts, apartment complexes. We've been working with them for almost 20 years. They have a parcel that they bought almost 15 years ago in Santa Cruz to build a 40 to 50 unit apartment complex on. They have been fighting City Hall that entire time. Now these people don't need to build another building. They want to build it because it needs to be built. The neighborhood groups, the neighbors around the area, it happens to be near a mortuary and a crematorium. So the neighbors who live in the area formed a group, hired an attorney, and sued to stop them from building the complex because the air quality was unsafe.
Oh.
Now wait a minute. The neighbors who live next to the crematorium formed a group to file a lawsuit to keep them from building something because the air was unsafe. That's what we face, day in and day out. We need all of us to start showing up and speaking out. Not just saying I want housing, but to literally show up at city council meetings time and time again to speak for housing. When the county board of supervisors has a meeting about a project, show up and voice support. I'll put my hat over to the St. Francis Center side. When we were trying to build St. Leo's, we had a parcel with a fourplex and an old house that had a bunch of illegal outbuildings around it that we bought. We worked to do a lot merger and then build a 15-unit complex to house families. It took us 4 years to get that built. We're a nonprofit trying to do good. 4 years. We had neighbors showing up, we had to go through the same circuit like any other developer. We had to go to the neighborhood group meetings. We had people showing up, the next door neighbors. No, 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 don't build it next to me. We designed and redesigned the building. We wasted tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars repositioning the building, shifting things around. We designed the building, we moved windows. One neighbor didn't want anybody looking into his backyards. So we raised the height of the windows in one room and moved them to another spot. That's money. Money being spent to appease somebody next door who doesn't want to build. People raised a ruckus about parking. People raised a ruckus about, anything they could raise a ruckus about. Luckily, we had a bunch of people that we were serving who packed the council chambers to show support for the project. Had that been a for-profit developer, it wouldn't have happened. Wouldn't happen. Think about politicians, right? They need political cover. They need us to show up, to give them the cover, the confidence to step forward. Because if you're a politician, you are one election away from not having a job, right? And if I lean a little too far out, pushing the housing agenda, what's going to happen? Look at what just happened in Redwood City. The city council just got flipped. It was a pro-housing city council. There was a city council that had a vision years ago. They came up with their whole downtown precise plan to put the theater in, to revitalize that downtown. To me, that is one of the best downtowns in the county now, by far. I live in Foster City. I go to Redwood City on the weekends to go to dinner, to go to the movies. It's vibrant. It's lovely. It's becoming a walkable downtown. Why is that? They built up. It's dense. How many of you have traveled in Europe? How many of you love Paris? Or pick any city, Vienna, right? They're beautiful. But what are they? Dense. Dense. They're not quarter-acre single-family homes. They're 3, 4, 5, 6-story buildings. Dense. People live walkable lives. They come spilling out. Everybody doesn't have a car. I love going to San Francisco. My daughter's one of the many, she doesn't have a car. She takes public transit or Lyft or Uber. So we have to start thinking differently. We have to deconstruct this world that we have in our heads and start looking at this dense urban world. That's our only future. Again, if we want to have green space, we've got no other choices.
I've been reading just a little bit about a couple of projects in the eastern part of Menlo Park. The Facebook, which would add another 7,000 and maybe more. I'm not quite sure what the size of the Facebook village is. And then the new Greystone project in East Palo Alto that sounds extremely dense and has at least as many. What concerns me there is transportation, getting around.
I agree, but if we don't build it, we're still in a huge deficit.
But
You're right. I mean,
do you believe that, I can't be specific about these projects, but do you believe in general that if these projects are built, more of the workers will live in them? Or will it continue to be the kind of situation as now where there are young people who want to live in the city and they commute down here? Because the traffic seems terrible, adding more seems worse.
And traffic is terrible, and it will continue to get worse, because if we don't build it here, we don't create the opportunity for people to live here. You can't mandate, right? We don't mandate where people live and work. So people can commute back and forth. But a big reason why so many people commute and why we have all this congestion heading toward the bridges and toward the major funnels is because where's the housing? It's in the East Bay. So we need more housing here on the peninsula. We have, it's close to 225, 250,000 inbound commuters every day coming into the county. So even if we built 7,000, 8,000, 20,000 more units, we're still way short of what we need to have enough housing here for people not to have to commute. Now, some people may choose to live here and commute. I mean, when I was first married, my wife and I had jobs in different cities, so we kind of picked a spot in the middle and commuted shorter commutes in double directions. So you're going to have households like that, but we need to create opportunities for people to not have to commute as far, I believe.
I want to speak to how Facebook thinks about traffic and commutes. My husband works for there and was talking to the transportation manager who runs all those buses you see up and down 101. And the conversation they were having was that Facebook anticipates needing to run buses as far out as you can. How far out do you need to go to be able to buy a house for $500,000?
Right.
Friends, that is Modesto.
Correct.
So if you want traffic, or anywhere,
Right.
don't build housing here.
Right.
I can guarantee you traffic
Well, the other
will
issue,
get worse. Because I drove to Modesto one afternoon recently, and it was a 3+ hour drive. And it's not because Modesto is a fun tourist destination.
correct. Correct. Well, the other interesting, you raise a great point that I failed to touch on is circling into transportation, right? You see people protesting these Google buses and the Facebook buses, but let's be real. Each one of those buses is keeping 20 to 50 cars off the road. So that's a crazy Faustian bargain too. If you're arguing against these buses, you're asking to put more single occupant vehicles on the road and clog our transportation system even further. I mean, back to this housing debacle we have, part of it is also our decisions about transportation, right? When BART was envisioned, originally, it was supposed to ring the whole bay. Now, San Mateo County got scared and said, no. We, voters here, killed it. And now, at an insane price per mile of track, we're trying to slowly get it into the county. We're paying, who knows how many % more now to try to do it in today's world than what we could have done when we did it before. And if you take it even further back, our decisions as a state, a county, and a nation to bet on single-family cars instead of mass transit are coming home to roost. It was great back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. My father-in-law grew up in Susanville, okay? Way up north of Reno, out there in the cow country. And he could take public transit, he ended up going to school here. He could take public transit, he could take a train from Susanville into San Francisco. At that time, this is back in the 20s, 30s, all the way up to the 40s, the lower deck of the Bay Bridge was all transit. It was mostly rail, and it had a couple of lanes for trucks for moving cargo. The whole lower deck was mass transit. We disassembled all those tracks, sent it away in favor of cars. And now, many years later, we built BART and spend billions of dollars to put a tube under the bay. We originally had a plan, if you see that extension by the airport, 380 was supposed to be another bridge going across the bay. That got scuttled. Okay? Which would have been another transportation corridor. We've underinvested in transit as much as we've underinvested in housing. The other thing we don't have is we don't have lateral lines. Okay? We've got BART and we've got Caltrain, but we don't have feeder transit that's running laterally to bring people to it. So what do? I know a lot of people whose wife or husband in the morning drives their spouse in a car to BART or to Caltrain so they can get on the train and go somewhere, and then drives back in the evening and picks them up, which further clogs Hillsdale, Ralston, pick your arterial that's going kind of east-west. That's another reason why they're clogged up. We haven't invested in that mass transit that moves people east-west, all up and down the peninsula. So, yes?
Do you think Google, Facebook, et cetera, are getting religion about creating housing for the jobs they're bringing in? Or is this sort of a nice thing to
Well,
say?
the interesting story there is, if you actually know much about Google, it's the city of Mountain View that actually has been holding Google back. The city had a policy against housing east of 101, which is where the bulk of the Google campus is. So, for many of it, it's finally flipped in the last 2 years. The city is now on board with putting housing east of 101. But their argument was, we don't have the support there, we don't have the schools, we don't have the infrastructure in place to do it. So it's been our public policy in many cases that's held that back. Google was trying to be forward-looking, trying to get housing close to their campuses, and they were fighting an uphill battle. Others are getting religion now. But some were pushing very hard, and they were thwarted in their efforts to do it. So I think we have to do more. Now the other is think about, I like to use the carrot and stick analogy. And Pat's probably heard me and others talk about this, but if you think about development processes today, what developers need, if you want housing to be built and be built more quickly, is you need to give people a simple roadmap that they can follow. And then if they follow that roadmap, they get to build things. Kind of like if you're raising children, if you give them instructions they can follow, it's easier to hold them accountable, right? Well, we don't do that with housing. We have this loose set of rules in most cities, and then a developer comes in and says, all right, your rules say I can put 100 units per acre, and you come in with a 100 unit per acre project, and then it goes to the planning commission, and they go, well, I don't like the way you have it here, and I don't like your colors, and I don't like this, and I don't like that, so bring it back to me with 95 units, and we'll talk. So they rush back, and the architects scribble on a bunch of paper, and they come back and bring them 95 units, and then, well, a neighborhood group complained about this, so change this building, move that, do this, do that. And then what do? We say, if you want to build this, you have to give us 15% of your units as low-income units. Now, on the surface, that sounds great, right? Why don't we do it the other way? Instead of a stick, let's make it a carrot. Let's say, this parcel is zoned for 100 units per acre. You bring me 100 units per acre, you can build it. End of story. If you give me a low-income unit, I'll give you 2 more market rate units. Give developers an incentive to give you low-income housing. We don't do that. We hold them ransom and we beat them up. Instead of saying, wave a nice little carrot in front of them and go, if you do this, you can build more. You can go up 2 more stories. You can double your density, something. Give people. Now, the county, at the state's request, there's a set of rules. If you bring a low-income housing project forward, like we did at St. Francis Center, you get exemptions. So you get a couple of little gimmies and bonuses, but that's only if it's a 100% low-income project, which makes it more complicated. Question in the back.
Question is there a community, you mentioned Redwood City, that had a plan that was in place a number of years ago, and it really did.
It revitalized.
It just is wonderful in many ways.
Correct.
I mean, the use for everybody.
Right.
It's all inclusive. Is there any other community that's looking at this and coming up with streamlining? Is there anyone that's kind of taking the lead on this? San Carlos is doing a lot of multi-unit developing.
There is finally more multi-unit developing happening up and down the peninsula. I mean, Menlo Park's building more. Burlingame's finally got a couple of projects on the books, and there's a couple coming out of the ground now. San Mateo's been building quite a bit. But if you look at that relative to the number of square feet of office space that's being built, it's still a drop in the bucket, right? Because like in Burlingame, there's a project that's going to be, I think the one that's out of kind of the end of Hotel Row there, going up, that hard left turn happens on 101, and now you suddenly see this 797,000 square feet. Well, in today's world, depending on who you ask, it's somewhere between 190 and 225 square feet per person is what you end up with per employee in an office building. So think about how many people will be populating those office buildings when you build 500,000 square feet or 1 million square feet or whatever. That's more housing demand. If you look at it, there are different sources, but the BIA, the Building Industry Association, which is a pretty credible group, they say a healthy economy is 1.5 jobs per housing unit. So in San Mateo County, between 2010 and 2016, and this is on the Housing for All, Home for All website, we were, over that span of time, we were at a 20-to-1 deficit. I'll give you the exact numbers. We added, where's my stats here? We added 79,000 jobs in the county during that 7-year span, and we built 3,844 units of housing in the county during a 7-year span. Therein lies the rub. So, yes?
It seems to me that we're addressing the need for more housing and more intense housing. That seems obvious, but we're not addressing the fall-down problems such as quality of life, congestion, water usage, infrastructure. All of these things that are sort of rearing their heads like Tyrannosaurus Rex, and all we want to do is build more blocks of houses. It's not going to solve all the fall-down problems that some of us are worried about.
I'll beg to differ, and here's why.
Okay.
Sprawl is the enemy. I have a dear friend who's an architect, and he and I have been friends for decades. And he and his firm, for fun, did a study on the city of Modesto. The city you were just talking about. And that city, even some of our cities in the Central Valley are struggling with some of these same issues. They're trying to figure out, how do we make this work? Well, a lot of our cities, especially when they have a lot of available land, their solution is, you need more housing, you just build it further out, and further out, and further out. Well, sprawl creates a unique problem for cities. It's infrastructure. If you have density, the number of taxpayers per mile of street is much higher. And therefore, you actually have more revenue to plow into infrastructure than you do if you let sprawl happen, and you have people spread over hundreds of square miles, and you have all these roads to maintain. That's the problem. Because we became enamored with cars, we built a sprawl environment. If you go to Europe, and you look at a lot of those cities, they're dense clusters. And I spent a lot of time in Germany. I happen to speak German. So, there, when they build a new village or new town, it's dense. So that you can have very frequent rail transit back and forth. We have a chicken and egg problem. We've let sprawl happen, and so we can't afford, because our people are spread out so much, we can't afford to run transit frequently enough for it to be viable for a typical person or people to be patient enough to use. In Europe, where they've kept things dense, they've got the frequency of rail travel. You go to London and move around the greater London area, you go to Frankfurt, pick any city in Europe. And rails come in during the business day, every 5 minutes practically. So it's really easy. I just show up, I can have a meeting, the meeting runs long, it's no big deal. Here, you have a meeting that runs long, you gotta wait an hour. Sometimes 2 hours for the next bus, the next rail line. Unless you happen to be on Caltrain, and even that, during the middle of the day, stretches out to a really long wait, and a bunch of trains packed. During the commute time, it stretches out to a long wait again. Unless it's a Giants game, where they stack the trains. That's a different story. So, it's a chicken egg. We need the density to actually have the money where we need it to take care of the infrastructure. The problem is getting there. And part of that is we just got to bite the bullet, and we got to start doing it, because there's no other way at this point. We are doing, we have a finite amount. We have to conserve and preserve more and more and more. I mean, this is another area. We're way behind a lot of other parts of the world in graywater reclamation. There was a nice little publicity stunt last year when the mayor of San Jose, Sam Licardo, and I think it was the mayor of Santa Clara, drank the water that was coming out of the sewage plant, right? It's safe. We just have a predisposition against it. Now, there will be another, we could pump it in. I talked to a couple of water engineers. One of the solutions is to make it more palatable for the general public. Have the water coming out of the sewage plant, instead of sending it to the bay, pump it into the aquifer. And let it percolate back up and be drawn back out of the wells that we have serving a lot of these areas. We have to rethink water. We waste, right now, you look at our typical shower enclosure, our bathrooms, the way our houses are plumbed, we're wasting a ton of water because we're not reclaiming that water to use in our gardens. A lot of the water coming out. Really, the only thing that's truly unsafe is your toilet water. But your sink, a lot of detergents now, you can use a different kind of detergent, and a lot of detergents are much better. You can literally, in many cases, pump the water from your washing machine straight into your garden. The city of Foster City amazingly just passed an ordinance that will allow you to do that. And I'm going to be one of the first people in line to do it. Because I want to save that water. And I'm going to dig up part of my lawn, and I'm going to put a storage tank. And I'm going to put a little pump. I'm going to pump the water out of my washing machine into the storage tank, and I'm going to use that storage tank to water my gardens, my lawn, and other things. So I think we have to be more innovative. We've done some great things on water conservation as far as toilets have become more and more efficient. We've got low-flow aerators. We've done a lot of things to really reduce consumption down, and we can keep doing more. We've just got to keep on that path. I mean, if you look at, we have the systems already developed. Look at the way our nuclear submarine program works. Those subs stay underwater 6 months straight. They have water reclamation systems. They repurpose the water. There's a system you can, I went online the other day because I have some friends who go to Burning Man every year out in Nevada Desert. And I'm on this thread. And somebody was saying, I want to figure out how to do a shower. And I went online, and in 2 minutes, I found a shower system. There's all the instructions to build your own reclamation shower system. So you can shower all day long and not use a drop of water, other than what's in the system. It's a closed loop. You run the water through a set of filters, you heat it, it runs back up. I love to stand in the shower. I hate the drought. I hate having to get out of that thing in a couple of minutes. As soon as it's legal, I'm going to build it in my own master bedroom. Then I could stand there all day if I wanted to. So I think we just have to keep being more innovative. There are ways to use the resources we have better. We just have to keep challenging ourselves to do it. Okay.
One problem we haven't talked about is gentrification, which really takes existing housing that used to be available for people in Hamas needs and takes it away. How do you deal with that?
Well, again, build. What happens to gentrification, right, is if you have a scarce resource, and who can get it? People have the most. Now, then everybody says, well, that's why we need rent control. But again, rent control doesn't put another unit on the market. In fact, another thing that rent control does is it actually reduces turnover. And if you look at, let me give another little story. Food stamps. Right? Who thinks that food stamps is a great program? Right? It's a good program, right? It helps people that need help with food. Now, if I have a food stamp and you don't have food stamps, and we go to your grocery store, I give you my food stamps. Did you take a discounted price on milk?
Did I take a discount on the milk?
Yeah, but I bought with my food stamps.
You don't know.
No, we don't. No. We as a society say if you need help with food, we provide the help. And the seller of the goods and services that the food stamps are used for gets full price.
And that's what the Section 8 program does.
To a certain extent, yes. The difference structurally between Section 8 and food stamps is we don't inspect the grocery store. We don't have a set of standards that we hold the grocery store to that's artificial. I'm one who mandated Section 8 be taken in a lot of our projects. There's a bill right now that would mandate owners to take Section 8. Does anybody want to know why owners don't want to take Section 8? I'll tell you why. The program doesn't work real well. And I've been one that's gone to county meetings in San Mateo County, in Santa Clara County, and people have tried to fix it, but it still has problems. Here are the problems. And I've been honest when I've done the meetings with the county. Under the Section 8 program, somebody has a voucher. You have to have the unit inspected before they can move in. Now, so we're assuming the consumer can't make an intelligent decision. So we have to wait for an inspector from the county to show up and look at the unit and say it's okay. So in a market with limited supply and high demand, as an owner of a unit, do I want to hold this precious resource out of the market waiting for an inspection, or take the tenant who can move in right now? We're asking that owner, not the grocery store guy, gets his $4 a gallon for milk, no matter who brings in food stamp or dollars, they get their $4, no matter what. We're asking this person to wait. On top of that, every year the unit's inspected. And this is the truth, because I've lived this world. If the unit doesn't pass inspection, the funding is withheld to the owner. And it doesn't matter why it didn't pass. And I've seen this repeatedly. It doesn't pass because it's dirty or there was damage in the unit, and it was caused by the tenant. The owner doesn't get paid. Now, we manage properties for clients. A lot of our clients, they own this rental housing, it was their retirement. It's paying for care for an elderly parent or for the person who owns it. They're in a facility, they need that rent check to come in, they need us to send them the money so they can make the payment to cover what they need to cover. So in their rational mind, market rate tenant or Section 810, take that risk? They say no. If we want this stuff to work, if we want owners to willingly do this, we have to change the way these programs work. And don't even get me started. I mean, the way cities are funded is a train wreck. Pat, you can stand behind this, I'm sure. Cities have a disincentive to build housing, right? Cities want Costco's, office buildings, businesses, because if you look at the way cities are funded in this state, they get their money from transit occupancy taxes, from business license taxes, from head count taxes, from gross receipts taxes. That's how cities get funded. Cities look at housing, if you're in the business of running a city, housing is a resource drain, not a resource producer. So we have a bunch of structural problems, the way we put our world together, that exacerbate the problems we have. And we have to start digging in and look at these things. We have to look in the mirror, and we have to start making hard decisions and pushing through the stuff to really solve it. Yes?
So from a practical standpoint, I am in the, yes, we need to build more housing, and would have added an ADU, except we did our house remodel 5 years ago before Redwood City changed its rules, and it was going to involve tearing down half the house to get the necessary parking. But we're not just facing a housing crisis, we're facing a moral crisis, and I haven't heard you speak about that. I think I'm probably, I could be wrong, but I'm probably the only, am I the only one in the room with kids in public school right now? You've got kids in school, okay. Grandkids, but I've got kids in the Redwood City School District. We have 4 elementary schools closing this year. Half of those kids have left because their parents can't afford to live here anymore. Which means their parents are living in Modesto.
Right.
And driving back here in order to work.
Right.
Which means building isn't going to solve the problem for them if it's going to take, even if we were on a 2-year cycle, those people are already gone.
Right.
How do we stabilize neighborhoods and communities now? And I haven't heard you talk about the moralness of keeping people in place.
So it can be solved today. It can. Actually, my wife and I created a PowerPoint slide deck. It explains it. We circulated this 3 or 4 years ago to elected officials, to all kinds of people. What we need to do is treat this like we would a natural disaster. If we had a 9.0 earthquake in the Bay Area, what would happen? We would set aside zoning rules, we would set aside everything to build tomorrow. Look at what we do after a hurricane hits. We bring in FEMA trailers, we bring in resources to get stuff built. So at the time we put the slide deck together, you could buy a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 800 square foot modular home for $40,000. Today, you can buy them for about $50,000. We have parking lots all over the place. How many of you have seen the movie Ready Player One?
I haven't read the book.
Okay, I'm a sci-fi freak. In that movie, there's this thing they call a stack, and it's literally a bunch of junky old mobile homes and trailers that have been lifted up with steel structures stacked on top of each other. We We could solve the housing crisis immediately if we all collectively wanted to put trailers in our driveways, in the parking lots of our schools, churches, county parking lots, whatever. It could be solved right now. It's us. It's us not treating it like the disaster that it is. We have to collectively have the political will to embrace the changes, and we don't. So that's the moral imperative is us. We, that's why I keep saying, we have to show up and say, build, build, build. We have to speak, not in the abstract, yes, we need more housing. We need to be specific. We need to take action collectively and start showing up and start doing the things that are going to make it happen. But we're not. Because, again, in the specific, I don't want it next to me. I don't want the roads crowded. The roads are already crowded, and it's going to get even worse if we don't build here. You think this is bad? I mean, how many people were here during the dot-com bust, right? After 2000, right? What's different about the economy today than then?
Not much.
A lot's different. The companies that drove the dot-com boom didn't make money. Most of them. It was based on the dot-com. The dot-com 1.0 was, lose $1 per customer and make it up in volume, right? That model didn't work. It crashed and burned. You look at the companies that are driving today's economy, Apple has more money than all but 5 of the world's largest countries. Google has more money than most countries. I mean, and look at what's going on. They're buying land and building buildings like there's no tomorrow. Do you think they're doing that because they don't think they're going to have more employees? People are coming, one way or another. Yes, you've been waiting patiently.
So you say you think build, and you are talking about only building houses and densifying people to make things cheaper. Look at San Francisco, it's more expensive than anywhere else here.
Right.
New York, more expensive. Paris, more expensive. And they have transit, they have subways. And even after we build everything, who is going to pay to build transit to move people around? And also, who will pay for building schools? You people cannot just live in houses. You need parks, you need a lot of infrastructure. Who will pay for it? The fees.
We have to.
The cities charge fees after Nexus starting. They don't randomly charge it. The fees are used to pay for the infrastructure. If developers don't pay fees, basically everyone will be subsidizing market rate developers to build luxury housing. And every one of us will be paying all this infrastructure, schools, roads, everything, and transit.
Right.
And middle class is already stretched. And you are going to spread this all throughout everywhere. Build is not the solution. And as for the moral question, I think we need to look at is not only housing, where offices are located. Why do they have to all be located here? What if we move offices to Modesto? A lot of cities in California need jobs. Not just here, we shouldn't be hogging all the jobs. That's selfish. We should be spreading the jobs, spreading the wealth to other cities who need it. And so the solution shouldn't be just building housing, only housing, transit, and office. These 3 things need to be looked at together, and not just building here, building elsewhere.
I don't disagree, but people want to be here. I mean,
Because we never set limit on only building here. So Facebook can building here. They don't have incentive to move elsewhere. It takes effort to have a separate office, but we can incentivize them to move. People want to be here because the jobs are here. Incentivize these big companies who have so much profit to move. They are online. They can work remotely. You can have conference with someone in Germany. Why not have offices in other cities in California?
They do.
People want to come here. but then we are doing planning. We shouldn't be letting people doing what they just, we should be planning for the future, directing the companies, directing the builders to build properly, in a balanced way.
There, I think we'll have to respectfully disagree a bit. People want to be here. They want to be here because this is where the universities are. If you look at the way development happens and vibrant economies happen, they happen around confluences of universities. When you have a lot of very innovative universities, you look at Research Triangle Park area in North Carolina. You get vibrant economies around where you have.
UCs haven't expanded. We should invest in multiple UC campuses to make them stronger. Then we can have multiple universities that are stronger, not those existing ones, right? So we can do a lot more.
We can, but again, people want to be here for more than just.
Look at the number. You said housing prices deconstructed, okay? Office growth in Santa Clara County is 7 times more than the normal growth before. So it's 7 times more than the housing growth. San Francisco County is 13 times more. I don't know what's San Mateo County. It's also like 7 times more. So we are already building 7 times more office than housing. Now we are still blinding ourselves. Don't look at office growth. Let's just keep building housing. You are chasing after a runaway trend because they'll keep building office. You are never ever going to build enough housing. Housing will always be a lot more expensive because they keep building office. That's not a solution to just look at housing.
Thank you for those interesting comments, but I must point out that we are now at 5:03.
All right.
We promised you might be done by 8, so if we could wrap up a little bit, that would be great. Do you have another one?
Yes.
Yeah, first.
So I just wanted to make a comment about the carrots stick comment that we have density bonuses, and it's a developer's choice whether they want to take advantage of it and create more floors if they're having affordable housing. So we have that already as a state opportunity for our planning departments and our developers. 60% of our workers in San Mateo County come from outside the county. And the ones who make the least come from the farthest. They're coming from Stockton and Modesto and other places. And so we're not talking about that. And in Redwood City, we've created 2,400 units of market rate housing. That's not inclusive. We have one apartment building that has studios for $3,800, 2-bedroom apartments for $7,400, and a penthouse for $32,000. That building was not built for our residents. And we can build as many of those market rate apartments as we want, because I agree with this previous speaker that we can build as much housing as we want. It will never be affordable for the people who service the most. We are closing 4 schools, and we have teachers who are sleeping in their cars. That's unacceptable. And so you may be against rent control. I am completely for stabilizing rents so that we can have people living in our community who serve us the most. And so I know that it sounds like a extreme idea, but we are losing the people who are really closest to us. And there is a moral issue when we are becoming a gated community. And that's what we are becoming, is a gated community. And I have no question for you. I just couldn't walk away without making a comment.
I have a question. As someone who is, you talked about showing up and saying yes. Can you talk a little bit more about how that can happen? City council meetings, yes, but there are other venues or other ways to say yes to customers.
Well, one is just doing something about it personally, right? We can explore putting an ADU in our own yard. We can open our spare bedrooms up now that we're empty nesters. Hip Housing in San Mateo County is a great organization that has a home sharing program, and they match people up. In many cases, they're trying to match seniors up with other people to live in their extra bedrooms. So it's a way to take a precious resource that we have that's underutilized. A lot of us are living in 2,000 to 3,000 square foot houses with 1 or 2 people. That's a huge resource that's underutilized. So back to the moral imperative, what we collectively can start doing things to open up our housing, open up and do that. And again, showing up city council meetings, planning department meetings, right? Your planning commission. Because most of these projects go to the city desk, to the planning department, they get shifted over to the planning commission. The planning commission looks at it. A lot of times you have a neighborhood group. Redwood City has lots of little neighborhood associations. Any project that happens within a neighborhood group has to go to that neighborhood association first, and then it goes to the planning commission, and then it goes to the city council, or if it's in the county, it goes to the neighborhood commission, then the county planning department, and then the county board of supervisors. But showing up at those various meetings and speaking to saying yes, that's going to begin to move the needle. It gives the politicians a voice that someone is there other than an anti-growth person speaking against it. And again, back to your question about development. Cities are building office buildings because they are financially incentivized to build office buildings. We have to change the tax structure of how money is allocated if we want to have things happen differently. That's again, we're the voters. We ultimately have the power. We are choosing not to. So if we want to change, we have to begin to envision that change and make the change happen by showing up. But we're not. Collectively, we're not. We are letting it happen and not showing up. And we'll have to disagree about, I think people are building here because they want to be here. People like the universities, they like the culture, they like the climate, if I had a choice, I would live here over Nebraska, I'd live here over Modesto, I'd live here over... Now, I could move to Nevada and have a much better tax structure, right? They have no income tax and no sales tax. But I don't want to live in Nevada. So I'm happy to pay higher taxes for the privilege of living here. But I can pick up and move. I don't, because I want to live here. So people are going to vote with their money and their feet and go where they want. If they have the means, they're going to go there. So I think you got to recognize that. And the reason prices keep going up is classic economics, supply and demand. You're right. We've been building more office space. We've been bringing more people in. And what does that do? Raises the demand. So the price goes up. So we have to balance that. But it's been our planning processes that have blocked the housing development to keep pace. We have not shown up as citizens in droves and said to our city councils and to our planning commissions, build housing at least in an equal pace with office. We haven't done that. We haven't done that for decades. And that's why we have the disaster that we have in our hands right now, because we haven't shown up. You've been waiting patiently.
I first want to suggest applaud Councilwoman Reddy. Imagine if we have a city council person sitting right here with us. One of the things you brought up, Michael, is that it takes a long time, like 5 years for the whole process to get done. Well, we have 15 floating homes, which I'm still taking up. I thank you for the permission. On this wall here, 3 stories, 2 stories, and a few 1 stories. They're completely empty. About 100 service workers, people, it could be low-income housing for the people that serve everybody here in our city. And like I said, they have to live pretty far away or have a lot of families in one apartment. So I just wanted to let you know, if you'd like to look at them afterward, they have small packets of them, and it's just a matter of, like you said, being creative.
Right.
We need to show up and ask the city to use these. There's a new law, or not so, AB 2135. Surplus land, if it's empty and they're going to be taken away, should be used for the public good. And we have permission from the state agency in charge of this. Betty Lee is fantastic. She's our state controller, and she's the chairperson, and she's just great. She's tremendous, and she says, do the legislation again. We had once before. They will support it for low-income housing. So please come and look and have a sign-up sheet and come to the next city council meeting. We bring this up back.
Yes.
Would you speak to SB 50?
I don't have all the specifics on SB 50. I don't, so I can't. And it's still kind of in its We're in the phase where they're still negotiating all of the terms. What the broad intent of SB 50 is to expand.
I think the part that I've been thinking about, and I don't know all the rest of it very well, is requiring cities to build housing of greater height than they already have wished to.
Correct.
Along transit corridors, and not giving them any choice.
Correct.
About this. I know the Board of Supervisors voted on it yesterday, but I don't know if they did. They didn't do it, they were going to, but they didn't. But in other words, the red flag is it takes away all local control.
It actually does not take away with local control. 50 does not take away local control. The question I have about it is that it will exacerbate gentrification and doesn't provide the opportunities for enough affordable housing, but it does not take away local control.
Market housing?
It doesn't have enough to really serve the area because it will go into opportunity areas, and those opportunity areas are areas that are currently naturally affordable neighborhoods where people are living affordably.
So it will or it won't go into those?
It will go into those areas, and it provides incentives for developers to create more market rate housing, and has a mechanism for displacing low-income communities. That's my objection, but not the local control part.
But it would provide more housing.
Yes.
Yes.
But it doesn't take away local control?
No, but that's what a lot of city council members are saying, that it does, and that's their objection, but it's not true. How does it not? It creates a mechanism for their building more housing, but they have control over whether they do it or not.
Yeah.
Something that came to me, there was no choice.
Yes.
With all the schools that are closing because we have much smaller families, it seems to me that it could be a source of income for housing, maybe mobile, but maybe tiny houses that would be available to people that work for the school or other.
I mean, that's a
So that
model.
we can keep the ideal school size for the children is their neighborhood at about 300 kids. And when they consolidate, they've got thousands.
Right.
And they've got campuses that they're not going to use anymore.
The school district won't run, Redwood City School District won't run a school site with fewer than 400 students at it because fiscally they can't make that work.
What if they had income from some of the property that,
The way Redwood City's funding all comes from the state, and a little bit of, so we would have to go to the state legislature in order to get additional funding. It's a mess.
There are some school districts, so the county, which I serve on their housing board with Karen, had the vision to build housing on the college campuses in order to have housing for staff and professors, and they hold some aside in order to recruit and bring in new faculty. That's been ravingly successful. And they've set aside some programs to also help faculty and staff with down payments on houses so that they can move out of the housing and then get into a more stable position later on. There's a couple districts in Santa Clara County that have done the same thing on some of their surplus land. So that's a model that we need to be exploring and doing more of. I think there are ways that school districts can do that, and I would encourage if your school district isn't, then I would show up at school board meetings and suggest that they look at some of the models that have already been propagated and perfected and are working, because it's another way. I mean, there is no one single thing that's going to solve this, right? It's going to take a lot of action on a lot of different people's parts. My brother-in-law is in the healthcare industry, and I've been encouraging him to think about doing the same thing on hospital campuses. They, take that parking lot and add some housing on top of it. So that you can have some additional housing available for workers or other people in the community nearby. Why not? What a great place to put senior housing next to a hospital. That would be brilliant, wouldn't it? Right? So there's so many things. I mean, it's just, there are there's so many ways we can begin to move the needle, but it's going to take a lot of effort on a lot of people's parts. And, you know, the lady over here talked about resources. Yeah, we've got to spend more money on schools. We've got to spend more money on roads. We've got to. At the end of the day, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting what we're getting, right? And what we've got is a housing deficit and growing gridlock. So if we don't start making those investments, it's not going to change. It's just going to get worse. We've got to start working hard and pushing and pushing and pushing. Pat, disagree with me?
Not at all.
Thank you.
We have to keep fighting. As I say, as Sister Christina and I and the board members of St. Francis and say, we have to keep fighting the good fight. We got to just keep pushing, pushing, pushing. Just one last comment is, as I said earlier, unless we change the world we've got, we can only build two types of housing: tax credit housing or high-end market rate housing. Those ones that have studios that rent for $3,000. The reason they rent for $3,000 is you can't pencil the deal unless you get $3,000 for a studio. Because your mortgage, if you pay $600,000 to $1 million per unit to build it, what's the mortgage on $1 million house? Right? Well, when you operate multifamily housing, the mortgage, just like for as a single-family owner, what's the rule of thumb? Spend 1/3 of your income toward your mortgage. It's the same thing if you're buying and building apartment complexes. 1/3 of that income is about all you want to have going toward the mortgage, because you got to pay the staff, you got to pay property taxes, you got to pay, on a typical new build, 20% of your income goes to pay property taxes on a new project. 19 to 20%. So you can't have much more mortgage than that. That's why the prices have to be that high. That's just the economics in place. But if you go to places like Texas that have open zoning, housing's not that expensive. The average person can buy a house because you have build by right. You can build what you want where you want in most areas in Texas. So maybe we don't want that Wild West mentality, but they don't have the same prices we have. This is back to, we got to look in the mirror. We collectively created the problems we have, and we collectively have to solve them. Thank you.
Thank you.